I have now owned my first turnkey rental properties since 2011. So at the time I'm making this video, it's been 9 years. I started buying turnkey rental properties 9 years ago. And what I want to give you today, in those 9 years, the three things that have cost me the most amount of money, all of which were more or less avoidable. I don't want to say they're completely avoidable because this is part of the you've got to learn lessons as you go type of thing. So I'm not going to knock myself for it, but mostly these could have been avoidable. Now, all three of these things I'm going to share as to what the most expensive costs to me as an investor, and quite frankly, fairly expensive, have been, will also apply to just general rental properties, because turnkey rental properties are it's just a method of buying a rental property. Once you own it, it's like owning any other rental property. The reason I'm specifying turnkey rental properties in this case is because a couple of the expenses are a little bit specific to the turnkey arrangement. You'll know what I'm talking about once I get into it. So, in 9 years of owning rental properties, what are the three things that have cost me the most amount of money? And I can give you like actual examples. The first thing was I had a property that, so when you buy a turnkey rental property, all of the major appliances should either be new or have a lot of life left. The whole idea is that you're not gonna have any major repair expenses for quite some time. So you get a property inspection. Make sure to check out the video on doing turnkey rental property due diligence. We'll link to it in the comments. But the property inspection is one of the most important things for any property, but especially turnkey rental properties too. So you get the property inspection. And this particular property, I don't know how this snuck through, but the inspection was done in July in Georgia. What does July in Georgia mean? Hot. It's very hot in Georgia in July. So when I went back, when this issue came up, I went back to that inspection wondering what in the world. And it was the heating unit, part of the HVAC system, but the heating unit specifically was not checked during the inspection because it's July and they're not going to turn the heat on. So it turns out, I think it was maybe 2 or 3 years later, that I got a notice from the property manager saying the heating unit was out. And I was like, well, how's that possible? Because it should have been new. That's when I went and checked the inspection report, only to find out it was never checked. And it really sucks that the property inspector, apparently according to the manager, the visual of the heating unit was obvious that it was old and clunky and whatever, which never should have been the case. So even if it wasn't tested, in theory, this should have been a visible problem and noted in the inspection report, because had it been noted in the inspection report, I could have asked the turnkey provider to put a new unit in, which is what they would have done, most likely. That's what turnkeys are supposed to do. So $3,500 later, I have to put a new heating unit in. And there was really no reason for this. And something like a heating unit or a big appliance, I should have had to replace for like 7 to 10 years from a turnkey. So that was first expense number one that should not have been. So that one is unexpected repairs, and this boils down to the property inspection. If you get a property inspection back and there's some major unit not checked, or they're like, oh, we don't really know the age of it, get confirmation. Get confirmation on the exact condition of all of the major appliances. So air conditioning, heating, plumbing, roof, hot water heaters, all the big thing. I mean, you can get verification on even the small things, but these big things matter. Had I done that, and had I been more anal about that property inspection, knowing that heating unit didn't get checked, I could have saved myself $3,500. So that's expense number one that cost me more than I would have cared to pay. Number two, and honestly, this is the biggest one, but expense number three is going to kind of tie back into this one, so that's why I'm telling it to you now. Number two, the biggest cost I've had as a rental property owner has been bad tenants. And here's where I went wrong on this. Arguably, the property manager went wrong, but I went wrong for not making sure this was happening. I've now had a couple cases, I'm in the middle of one of them right now, where the tenant was bad. No, sorry, 3 major cases. Oh, I forgot about the biggest one. So I had a tenant who lit the fireplace, didn't open the flue, left for a few hours, smoked out the whole house. It ended up being a $25,000 rehab. Fortunately, in that case, insurance covered it. That's why I wasn't thinking of it right off, because that money didn't have to come out of my pocket. So I actually kind of won on that one because I got a great rehab and it was an insurance situation. But that was bad tenant number one. Number two, I knew this couple was not really all that high quality. I don't really care if people are smoking pot, but these were major potheads. I don't know if they were smoking cigarettes in the property too. It was on a dumpier street and kind of one of the sketchier neighborhoods. These people, I knew it, the property managers knew it. We knew they were not of any class whatsoever. Again, I have nothing against pot and it has nothing to do with class, but the extent to which it was going, I don't even know if they were dealing, whatever was going on. And I feel dorky being like, ooh, dang that pot. I really don't care about pot. But it was the bigger picture of this couple, and they were there for, gosh, 3-4 years maybe. And we knew they were bad the whole time, but I had in my head, oh, well, I know they're bad now, but I'll just let it go until the end. And then we'll, fix up, we'll get better tenants, blah, blah, blah. Fast forward to when they moved out a couple of years ago, $8,000 turnover, because they just did not take care of the house in any which way, shape, or form. And you can only file insurance if you're able to file a police report. Dumpy carpets, paint slathered against the wall, broken storm doors, broken windows, torn up blinds, the whole kit and caboodle. None of that is worthy of a police report. I wish, but I couldn't file insurance on any of it. And so that was the first big turnover that I had, that I was like, oh, you can't let the bad tenants go longer than you need to, or than that you have to. Don't let it get to the end, because the longer they're there, the more damage is going to be there. So this ties back. So what could I have done differently? Number one, absolutely, hands down, required property inspections once or twice a year. And this goes into the turnkey model, because in the turnkey model, you're using property managers. And my managers, they were kind of like, yeah, we could do an inspection. Do you want us to? And I was like, yeah, that'd be great. None of us ever followed up. They didn't do it. No longer working with that property manager. And I just was like, I was pretty willy-nilly about it. So absolutely get those inspections done, because any possible repairs that you can nip in the bud before it gets terrible is going to save you a lot of money. So that was an $8,000 turnover. I'm currently in the middle of another $12,000 turnover for the exact same reason. And even worse, this bad property manager actually went and did an inspection and found all sorts of stuff and did nothing about any of it, including a leak. I was like, I'm sorry, we never fixed a leak. Are you kidding me? But that manager should have said, okay, we have a problem. Because now that this tenant left, and this goes to the criticality of the move-in inspection, I'm not even sure if I'm going to be able to withhold her whole security deposit, because this bad property manager did not take pictures of everything when she moved in to prove that it was in the best condition possible. Now that it's in dumpy condition, and she says, oh, well, when I moved in, it was really dumpy. Well, if I don't have pictures to prove otherwise, I'm not going to be able to charge her for all the damages. I'm right in the middle of that, so I don't know what the outcome is going to be. But regardless, at most, her security deposit was $1,100. So of a $12,000 rehab, I might get $1,100 covered, which is almost laughable in comparison to the big picture. But those are just the first examples that come to mind. Smoked out my entire house, $25,000 worth of damage. Fortunately, that didn't come out of my pocket. $8,000 turnover for no other reason other than just low class people, and we knew about it, and we never did inspections, never did anything. And now a $12,000 turnover, again, not keeping an eye on the tenants. So expense number two on me has been not keeping a closer eye on the tenants and therefore the property, in order to nip it in the bud, potential turnover cost. Huge. That is the number one expense to me so far. That puts the heating unit, that makes the heating unit going bad. I'd love another heating unit to go bad if it means I don't have these expensive turnovers. Expense number three in my 9 years of turnkey experience, the property manager. Here's where I personally went wrong with my property managers. So what I've learned about property managers, and this is not to say it's true for all of them, because I'm sure there's some phenomenal ones out there who stay phenomenal, but my experience for the most part has been this. I start with a property manager. They're fantastic. Like, my life is easy. Oh man, they are on top of things. Their communication is great. They're on top of the properties. They're putting the best tenants in. Like, life is gold. Well, what happens when someone is that good of a property manager? And this goes for any business. Well, I tell my friends about the manager. They tell their friends. Suddenly this property manager grows huge. And quite often they're not ready to grow that big. So their systems start to collapse. Their communication starts to suck. Suddenly they can't keep as many tabs on the tenants and the properties. They don't even know what's going on at some point. Then they have to hire new people to help them. Those people aren't always trained. They, the whole thing, it's like this cycle. They're great, 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 not great. Great, great. Yeah, I get a new one. Great, great, great. Not great. I've been through multiple rounds of this exact dynamic. It happens the same every freaking time. Where I personally went wrong in thinking of this cycle is I could pin, so far looking back, and again, this is all just like my own personal experience. I'm not going to say any of it's truth, but it's what I've experienced. I can concretely say that the minute the communication drops off from the property manager and things start to feel a little wonky, it's happening. I have needed to get out then. And it's a hard decision because you don't want to just like, like what if a property manager has family issues going on and they're struggling, and so it's kind of got them off their game for a minute, but for the most part, they're fine. You don't want to jump ship too soon. But what I've personally done, because I'm super gullible, so when I call them, I'm like, hey, we really need to take care of this thing. Like, whatever happened with that? And they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, yeah, no worries. You're taken care of, blah, blah, blah. It has never panned out like that. The minute they have to explain themselves and convince me why things are okay, it never is okay. And my problem has been that I've stayed with them for too long in that mode. So I've needed to fire property managers sooner in order to avoid the problems that came from it. Because here's what happens. When they start to suck, their tenant screening goes downhill. And that goes back to expense number 2. Let's see. Yeah, expense number 2, bad tenants. Their tenant screening can suffer. They're not doing property inspections. They're not even paying attention to your property. All of this, so the property manager is not the direct expense, but honestly, the bad tenant expense has arguably come from the property managers in my case. In all of the cases where I've had the really expensive bad tenant problem, there was a direct bad property manager tied to that in some way, shape, or form. Another expense I've had directly from a property manager is they didn't place a tenant in one of my properties for like 8 or 10 months, and they swore they were looking and blah, 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 and they finally resorted to a Section 8 tenant, which, God bless her, she's been there for a long time, years and years at this point, so it didn't work out terrible. But the bad property manager impacts everything about the property, whether it's vacancies, repairs, tenant quality, all of these things. And it's almost a little intimidating thinking of how much power the property managers have, but they do. So again, it's not that you're never going to have a bad property manager, and there's no way to necessarily avoid it forever, but being cognizant of when they start to suck. And when they start to suck, I have yet to have seen anyone suddenly unsuck. So get a new game plan, because just like the bad tenant expenses, the longer you let it go, the more those expenses are going to be building and snowballing. And you don't want to be on the other end of that after the snowball is there. So recap, I've owned turnkey rental properties for 9 years, starting 9 years ago. My 3 biggest expenses, the smallest of them all, has been the not knowing the exact condition of a major appliance. So I had the heating unit go out for $3,500 only 2 or 3 years into owning the property. Expense number 2, ultimately, one of the biggest, I think, is bad tenants. You have got to make sure your property manager stays on top of the tenants, and at a minimum, just get the inspection once or twice a year. That alone, it sounds obvious that that should be done, but oftentimes property managers don't do it, or they want to charge you for it or whatever. I don't care what they charge for it, do it. And number 3, the property managers themselves. And again, usually it's not a direct issue with them, but bad property managers cause problems in all of the things that can directly cost you money: the property condition, repairs, damages, and bad tenants. So I hope that helps if you're thinking about turnkeys. And don't take any of this to mean that turnkeys are bad or rental properties are bad or, oh my God, this all sounds so scary. it's all a reality of owning rental properties, but the good news is it's all fairly easily mitigated, not 100% because things are always going to happen, but I'm telling you how to avoid. So here's the good news. Those are literally the only 3 things that have cost me a lot of money in 9 years of owning turnkey rental properties or rental properties in general. So that makes the list of mitigations pretty easy, right? Like if you can avoid those 3 things by not making the same mistakes that I did, that doesn't leave a whole lot else for major expenses. So this should be good news, I think.